About 4 years ago, a woman whose daughter was getting married asked me to make her a nice opal pendant for the occasion. Now, I'm not really at liberty to reveal the identity of the mother of the bride, but, well, let's just say that you may have heard of her. Can't say anybody specifically, but I think you probably understand. Anyway, I'm sort of reluctant to tell the story of how I got into opal, but I started at the bottom. Flint knapping, making stone tools, usually out of flint. And eventually, the arrowheads started piling up, and when I filled the entire wall, I thought to myself, it's time to get into opal. It was only logical. So I bought a piece of opal online. I ground it down. Nice, pretty opal. And then I started to flake it. And wouldn't you know it, but I ended up with another arrowhead. I'm sorry for the poor photo, but that was 7 years ago, just after the invention of the camera. Then it finally hit me. What do people really want out of life? Obviously, most of us just want an opal arrowhead. So for the better part of a year, I dedicated myself to bringing opal arrowheads to the masses. Well, most everybody wanted one, but they all kept making excuses like they had to go to work or take care of kids or watch Naked and Afraid. It didn't take me long to realize that many pieces of nice opal are just too small for arrowheads. So I abandoned my goal to spread opal arrowheads across the planet, and I bought an opal cabbing machine, and you can't make arrowheads with this, by the way. And this is my first opal cabochon. Not too good, but with my talent, it was okay. So I made more and more opal cabochons, and sometimes I had better material than others. This is a pretty nice piece of material. So is this. But you never really know what you're going to get with rough opal, but sometimes you get lucky. Not that kind of lucky, but occasionally you get a really nice stone like this for $80. 30 carats. Not bad. Then one day, I had an amazing discovery. I discovered Andamuka Matrix Opal. This was to change my life. I bought my first piece of matrix, weighed about a pound, and I treated it so I could see the colored area so I'd know where to cut. It turns out that matrix opal is not only cheap, it's fun and it's addicting, almost like opal arrowheads. And over the course of 2 years or so, I made hundreds of matrix cabochons, of which these are some of the best. Now I have a confession to make. I am an opalholic, and there are no 12-step programs for this disease. But I can quit anytime I want. I just choose not to. Anyway, because of my disease, I managed to acquire a lot of really good opal, and that would come in handy because I soon got a request to make a large opal pendant from the mother of the bride. This time I'd be using real opal, not matrix. So I went to the bank and withdrew 4 of my best opals. I first went for a 1-ounce piece of meant-to-be plate opal. I worked it down and got a cabochon that had some nice red and green color and was 106 carats. And, sizes and everything, so my friends tell me. But this one was a little bit flawed because if you look at it from certain angles, there was no color at all. So because it was so directional, option number 1 was out. You may be familiar with this second piece of opal. It was 161 carats, and I started the video on this in 2014, and in 2018 I finished it. So as of 2014, this is what I had. And although it's very nice, it was a little bit odd, a little bit wonky, and I didn't think it was appropriate for this pendant, so I stopped. 4 years later, with a little bit more talent, I was able to coax some decent stones out of this otherwise pretty disastrous piece. You may be familiar with this opal as well, as meant to be dark base, and I didn't fail on this one. I did not fail. I produced an 83 carat beautiful stone, but she didn't like it. The background's not light enough. I'm telling you, I did not fail. No, I didn't fail. Here's the fourth stone, which is a great one. It's the Desert Queen, a named opal. This was mined in the 1960s at the famous 8 Mile field at Cooper Pedy. It's red crystal opal. It's fabulous in every way. I get a lot of comments that I should leave it as it is. Well, my decision on this one was to leave it as it is and not cut it. So let's review. I rejected the 106 carat meant to be plate opal because it was too directional. I also rejected the 61 carat 12 mile piece because it was too wonky back in 2014 anyway. The mother of the bride rejected the 83 carat meant to be dark base. I guess you wanted me to jump through more hoops. And I personally rejected the Desert Queen because it was just too beautiful a specimen to cut. So I was basically out of options. But then, out of nowhere, well, actually from somewhere, a mysterious new stone appeared. Would this be the answer to my problems? A 53 carat stone from Mintaby of super gem opal. The surface of it had a little bit of sand. I call that the front side. It had less sand, but the side looked good with a couple of defects. The back had a slightly thicker layer of sand, but it still looked pretty good. Now, any geek, and I didn't say I wasn't one, would like to measure it. And this one was about 39 millimeters long, 24 millimeters wide, and ranged between 5.5 and 7 millimeters in thickness. And the specimen was 53 carats, and I know everybody's interested in the statistics of things like that. So I wet the specimen to get a better look. On the back of the specimen, we can see the opal shining through, and the sides also look really good. Lots of color all the way around. But I noticed two little areas of sort of indentations, and we have to worry about cracks being present in these areas. But overall, the specimen looks good, so we need to grind it a little bit more and get some of that sand off. The little area is the area I just removed the sand from, and I've turned it around here and I've put a big S there. The S stands for, of all things, sand. I guess I really didn't need the giant S. But what I wanted to point out is that the sand is close to the thin edge of the specimen, and you never know how deep sand is, so that's a bad sign overall. So I continued to grind on it and got a little bit deeper, but I didn't get through the sand. I noticed this little fleck. This is where a chip came off in my hand, actually. That's one of those areas of indentations that was at risk for a problem. So I continued to grind, but I still was not able to get through the sand. That's when I realized that I might actually have to cut the area with the sand off in order to finish the stone. So I've got a beautiful stone, but it's got those inclusions. So I put it in a bag with water. You can still see the hazy remnants of the sand. As a relatively novice cutter with little experience with high-grade opal, I decided to get in touch with master opal cutter Michael Ferguson for some advice. And this is the extent of the clouds. It's pretty much clean as a whistle over here. It's pretty clean here. And Michael drew my attention to a pear-shaped area at the top of the specimen. I appreciate Michael helping me with this, but now 4 years later, I'm a much better cutter than Michael. Anyway, I concentrated on this area, and it really does look like a pear, only more colorful and, well, upside down. A fair warning to those of you who don't like to see opal cut. You can avert your eyes or maybe go watch PewDiePie. I cut 2 cuts there to remove this segment. And the next thing I had to do, of course, was to make another cut at the bottom, right there. So it's not on camera, so it won't hurt too much. And there it is. Another piece removed, and now it's obviously a pear, and I can work with it. At this point, I was tired of cutting, filming, and explaining things, so I turned the video camera off. I wanted to leave the original sound so you could hear it, but unfortunately, it was too noisy because of the machine. I said, I can do this. I'm just going to go for it. It was like Captain America. It was sensational. And I did go for it, and this is what I got. At this point, I turned the machine off, and the noise wasn't too bad, so I'll just let it roll from here. Of the stone, I think that's fairly good. And I still have these little pieces to botch, but that's what I've got. And this could have a name all its own. It could be in one of those Len Cram books with a name like the Rainbow Shield or some craziness like that. I've used up all my jokes. That's it. Super gem, I think, is the correct word for this one. I think that I've seen other things called super gem that weren't, but there's little doubt that this is. Just an awesome piece. It looks much, much better in person. I don't know. I guess you're thinking, how's that possible? But it is, actually. It's extremely bright. Well, the rest of the video here sort of speaks for itself, and I'll just put down the microphone and I'll pick it up at the end. I greatly appreciate all of the support that you've given me. I think that I must have the best subscribers in the whole world. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.